Good morning, K5A. We are going to finish up this week back in our new book, and we're learning about Joseph today. And I know that Mrs. Wink already went over some of these great stories in the Bible, but I just thought it would be a good review for us. And you can't get too much of the Bible in these stories. So today we're learning about Joseph, and we're continuing our story. Remember, yesterday we talked about Abraham. Because Abraham trusted God, he became God's friend. Because Abraham's son Isaac trusted God, he became God's friend too. Then Isaac had a son named Jacob. You guessed it, learned from his father to trust God. And then Jacob had a son, and then Jacob had another son, and another and another. Jacob had 12 sons in all. Their names were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Of all Jacob's sons, Joseph was his favorite. Jacob wanted Joseph to know that he was his dad's favorite, so he gave Joseph a special coat made of all the colors of the rainbow. This annoyed his older brothers. Why didn't they get special coats? To make matters worse, Joseph told his older brothers about dreams he was having. In his dreams, Joseph saw himself ruling over his brothers. He saw his brothers bowing down to him. Hearing about Joseph's dreams made his older brothers really annoyed and really jealous. So much that they decided they'd be happier if Joseph wasn't around anymore. And if you have brothers and sisters, it is really easy to get annoyed with them. I'm one of 4, so I know I have probably annoyed my older siblings. So one day when their dad wasn't with them, they picked Joseph up and threw him in a hole in the ground. They were just going to leave him there forever until they got another idea. Have you ever gotten so mad at your brother or sister that you wanted to sell them to the circus? Please don't do that, by the way. Well, Joseph's brothers actually did, except not to the circus. They sold Joseph to some folks traveling to Egypt who sold Joseph again when they got to Egypt. Now Joseph had been thrown in a hole and sold twice. What a lousy week. In Egypt, Joseph worked for a very wealthy man. Joseph was honest and hardworking, and the wealthy man liked him. But the man's wife told a lie about Joseph, and Joseph went to prison. Now Joseph had been thrown in a hole, sold twice, and sent to prison. Why would God let all of this happen to Jacob's favorite son? Wasn't Jacob a friend of God? Joseph could have gotten mad and decided he didn't want to be God's friend anymore, but he didn't. He still prayed to God, and he still tried hard to do the right thing. And God had a plan for Joseph. While in prison, Joseph told 2 of the men the meaning of their crazy dreams. God showed Joseph what the dreams meant. A few years later, Pharaoh, the king of all of Egypt, also had a crazy dream. He'd heard about a guy named Joseph who could interpret dreams. Pharaoh called Joseph out of prison and told him the dream. Once again, God gave Joseph the meaning. The dream, Joseph said, was a warning. For 7 years, Egypt would grow lots and lots of food, more than they could eat. But then for 7 years after that, they would experience a famine. And that is when no food is grown at all. If the Egyptians didn't store up all the extra food during the first 7 years, they wouldn't have enough to eat during the famine, and many people would die. Pharaoh was so happy that he made Joseph the second most powerful person in Egypt and put him in charge of all the food. And Joseph made sure they would have enough to eat when things got tough. Over here is when Joseph is in prison. Oh, goodness, he looks so terrible. And over here is when he has told the Pharaoh the plan, and the Pharaoh has made him second in command. When food stopped growing in Egypt, it also stopped growing where Joseph's family lived. They were really hungry, so hungry they traveled all the way to Egypt to see if they could find food there. And sure enough, not only did they find plenty of food in Egypt, but they also found their brother Joseph. They thought Joseph would be mad at them for selling him, but he wasn't. Why wasn't Joseph mad? Because he could see God's plan. If Joseph hadn't been thrown in a hole, sold twice, and then sent to prison, Egypt would have run out of food and many, many more people would have died. Joseph's family would have run out of food and they would have died. God used something very bad, the way his brothers treated him, to do something very good to save Joseph's whole family and all of Egypt. Joseph learned that God can use anything, no matter how bad, to do something for God. And they're all excited and happy. Now, our everyday truth for today is when I trust God, he uses the hard parts of my story for his good and glory. So I think a lot of us may be thinking, oh my goodness, this is kind of bad that we have to stay inside, we can't go to school. But you know what? God brings good things out of bad things. And I can think of the good thing is that I get to hang around with my own kids all day. And we don't have to really get all dressed up. We can just lounge around like some of you guys in our Zoom calls are still in your PJs, and how cool is that? So always look for something good and know that out of bad things, God brings good things. So, some questions. Why wasn't Joseph mad at his brother for selling him to be a slave in Egypt? That's right, boys and girls. He wasn't mad because he could see that if he hadn't have been sold and gone to Egypt, then so many people would have died. His own family would have died out of hunger. So because he was in Egypt, he got to save so many people by storing up that food for 7 years. And what can God do with the bad things that happen to us? And that's right, boys and girls. He can turn what was bad into something great. Now we're going to say a small prayer. Dear God, we believe you can use our hard days to do something good. Help us to stay positive as we trust in you. Amen. I hope you guys have a great, awesome, just restful weekend. And Monday, there's no school because it's Memorial Day. So I hope you guys enjoy an extra day of rest, and I'll see you on Tuesday.